Welcome to the video for section 59 of Hansen and Quinn's Greek Unintensive course. This section covers what we call the second aorist, and you'll find it in Hansen and Quinn on pages 169 to 171 and in the appendix on pages 659 to 660. The verbs you've learned so far follow the pattern that you see in this chart. Our example verb luo, luso, elusa, leluka, lelumai, eluthane has principal parts that are fairly regular, and you've been able to anticipate the pattern that you see there, with an omega in the first principal part, sigma omega or some form of that in the second, sigma alpha in the third, reduplicated beginning, and alpha at the end of the fourth principal part, mi at the end of the fifth principal part with that reduplication, and the sixth principal part starting with an augment and ending usually with thane. You've learned now all of the tenses that each principal part covers and which principal part you go to for each of the voices, active, middle, and passive. What we're going to focus on now is the third principal part. There's a whole category of verbs that have a variation in the third principal part that you'll need to learn how to accommodate. So let's get rid of luo and let's add one of our new verbs, lepo. The principal parts here are lepo, lepso, elipon, leloipa, lelemai, elefthane. So you can see that principal parts 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 follow the patterns that you've already seen, with variations that you've become accustomed to accommodate the consonant stem in the principal parts. So the third principal part is the one that looks a little strange. All the third principal parts you've seen so far have an alpha and usually a sigma alpha at the end of the word, but not lepo, not elipon. So what we're going to do in this rather long video is to teach you how to express the aorist, active and middle, of lepo and other verbs like them with second aorists. So that means we're going to have to do everything that the third principal part does. It covers the indicative mood, the subjunctive mood, the optative mood, as well as infinitives, and in each of those we'll have active and middle forms: active indicative, middle indicative, active subjunctive, middle subjunctive, active optative, and middle optative, as well as the active and middle infinitives. For the passive voice, you still go to the sixth principal part. Let's begin with the indicative. The second aorist indicative active uses, of course, the third principal part, and so let's have our principal parts here, and we'll single out the third principal part, that new second aorist that we're dealing with. And of course, it's going to need endings. Let's have a place for them, and then let me show you what they are. On, es, e, amen, ete, on. You should recognize those endings. I hope they look to you just like the active endings of the imperfect indicative. And that's really what they are, and so you already know them. Now you have to remember to put them on the third principal part of lepo when you want to have the aorist indicative, but those are the endings that you already know. Accent is recessive, and the default translation is the aorist translation, she verbed, past time simple aspect, as you have learned for so long for the aorist indicative. So let's see what an example like that of that looks like. Here is the stem still augmented because we are in the indicative, and we'll put those endings on there. And we'll put the recessive accent on, and we get elipon, I left, elipes, you left, elipe or elipen, she left, elipomen, we left, elipete, y'all left, and elipon, they left. So just as you did in the imperfect, you'll have to distinguish by context between elipon first person singular, I left, and elipon third person plural, they left, because the second aorist has the same duplication of endings that the imperfect indicative has in the active voice. Let's move on to the middle voice. Principal part 3 plus endings, and here they are. Oh, actually, let me remind you of the primary and secondary person markers. The aorist is still a secondary tense, and so even though we have this new set of endings and new form for the second aorist for our elipon type endings, we're still going to use the secondary person markers. And here they are: amen, u, eta, amatha, estha, anta. They are, in fact, just like the imperfect, indicative, middle, and passive endings. So again, you already know these endings. You're simply putting them on a different principal part. Accent for these is recessive. And let's see what the default translation is. She verbed for herself, or she caused to be verbed. Exactly the aorist middle translation that you would expect. So even though those endings may look familiar from the imperfect, they are now on the third principal part, and we're doing the aorist past time simple aspect. Let's try an example. Principal part 3, let's have the augmented stem and our endings. And what we're going to get then is, with the recessive accent in there, elipomen, I caused to be left. Elipu, you caused to be left. Elipeta, she caused to be left. Elipometha, we caused to be left. Elipestha, y'all caused to be left. And eliponta, they caused to be left. So that's the second aorist indicative middle. But of course, we have more moods that we need to learn. Let's go now to the second aorist subjunctive active. Third principal part, and really everything we're going to do in this video is third principal part, because that's the only one that is, I want to say, irregular, but of course this happens quite a bit. You'll have many second aorists, so it's just a new pattern to learn. We'll have the third principal part, and we're going to need the unaugmented stem, because now we're not indicative. Now we're subjunctive, so we're going to take that augment off and leave our unaugmented stem, which is just lip. We're going to need endings, and here they are: o, ace, a, omen, eta, osi. So once again, you know these endings. You're simply applying them to a different looking principal part and understanding that you need to recognize these also as subjunctive active endings for the aorist. Accent is recessive, and of course we have no default translation because you need context to know what to do with the subjunctive. But these are aorist, and so it will be simple aspect. So why don't we go ahead and see what those forms would look like. We'll put in our stems with the endings, and we'll add that recessive accent, and we get lipo, lipase, lipe, lipomen, lipeta, liposi. And that is your aorist subjunctive active. But of course, we also need it in the middle. And by now, you should recognize the pattern, principal part 3, and we're going to use the unaugmented tense stem from the third principal part. We're going to need some endings. And again, these are going to be familiar looking endings because they are the subjunctive, middle, and passive endings that we've already used for the present. These are the endings that we already learned for the present subjunctive, middle, and passive. Accent is recessive. And although we don't have a default translation, we should remember that it's aorist, and so this will be simple aspect when we use these subjunctives in a sentence. Let's go ahead and see what lepo would look like in the aorist, subjunctive, middle, and we'll put in the stems, and we'll get. after we have the recessive accent, lipomai, lipe, lipetai, lipometha, lipestha, and lipontai. So there we have the second aorist subjunctive middle. But of course we have more moods to do. Let's move on to the optative active, third principal part. And again, we're optative, not indicative. So we need our stem from the third principal part, but we need it without an augment. And our endings are going to follow the pattern that we've begun to see, where on this third principal part, aorist stem, we're going to add endings that we learned when we learned the present. So oimi, ois, oi, oimen, oita, oyen. The accent is recessive. And again, no translation because we don't have context, but it's simple aspect. So let's put that unaugmented tense stem in there, and we put the recessive accent on, and we get lipoimi, lipois, lipoi, lipoimen, lipoita, lipoien. You know the same pattern is going to emerge in the aorist optative middle, third principal part, unaugmented tense stem, and our endings, again, will be endings that we already know from when we learned the present. These are the endings, oimein, oia, oita, oimetha, oistha, ointa, that we already know as the present, optative, middle, and passive. Here, they're only going to serve for the middle because, of course, all aorist passive things come from the sixth principal part. But here on the second aorist, third principal part, we will apply these familiar endings that we once had for the present. Accent is recessive. And again, it's simple aspect. And there you see we've already put in that unaugmented stem. And let's get that recessive accent in there. And we get lipoimein, lipoia, lipoita, lipoimetha, lipoistha, lipointa. Can't translate any of them, but that is your second aorist optative middle. We've done indicative, we've done subjunctive, we've done optative. Let's go on and do the second aorist infinitive active. So once again, third principal part, and it's an infinitive, so there'll only be the one ending. And that ending is the one that you know already from the present infinitive active. It's got fixed accent, though, which will help you to see the difference between the present and the aorist. So we can simply learn the accent over the ending. The default translation for our simple aspect is to verb. So if we get our example verb out here and we go to that third principal part, we are going to use the unaugmented stem again, and we're going to add this ending and our second aorist infinitive active when we are using the verb lepo is lipein. And the translation is to leave. That leaves for us the second aorist infinitive middle. Third principal part and the ending. And this ending again, you already know, esthai. You've simply seen it as the infinitive ending for the present, middle, and passive. Here it will only serve for the middle, and again, the accent is fixed, so you can go ahead and learn it on the ending, esthai. Default translation in simple aspect is to cause to be verbed. And if we put our sample verb in there, we're going to get lepesthai, and that means to cause to be left. So those are all the new forms. And as I think you noticed, they were all endings that you already know. The challenge then is to remember that those endings mean something else, that are not imperfect or present endings anymore. And the way that you have to do that is notice the principal part. So learning your principal parts is getting ever more crucial so that you know the difference between elipon, which is I left or they left, and elepon, which is first principal part, and so now that's imperfect, not aorist. The translation of elepon is they were leaving or I was leaving. That's imperfect, not aorist. You have to know your principal parts to know the difference between elepomen and elepomen. Elepomen is the second aorist. I caused to be left. Elepomen is I was being left or I was causing to be left. It could be either imperfect indicative middle or imperfect indicative passive. You have to know your principal parts to know the difference between lipo and lepo. Lipo is the subjunctive active, and lepo, well, that can be several things, right? It can be present subjunctive active. It can be present indicative active. Let's see. And we can't forget also with that ending that the future from the second principal part, future indicative active, I will leave, also has that ending. So knowing those principal parts is crucial. I'm going to hammer this home more. Lipomai is the second aorist subjunctive middle. Lepomai is the present subjunctive middle or passive. Lipoimi is the second aorist optative active, whereas lepoimi is the present optative active. Lipoimen, aorist optative middle. Lepoimen, present optative middle or passive. Lipain is the aorist active infinitive to leave, whereas lepain is the present active infinitive to leave or to be leaving. Here with the infinitive, you not only have the principal part to tell you the difference, but you also have the different accents. So that helps a bit. And the same is going to be true with lepesthai, which is the aorist middle, and lepesthai, which is the present middle and passive infinitive. So the difference is to cause to be left is lepesthai. Lepesthai can be either to cause to be left or to be causing to be left or to be left or to be being left. My point mostly is learn your principal parts and they will tell you the difference in tense in all of these forms. And those are really all the variations of the second aorist. And this will not be the last second aorist verb you get, but now it's the one that you get to practice with in drills and exercises in Hansen and Quinn.